conflicting reports about George Floyd's death remind you of anything? Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America. Well, I've been trying like hell to avoid this topic. But I just couldn't, based on the information that just was released here. And the reason I could not avoid this topic was because of the obvious parallels. Let's walk down memory lane, ladies and gentlemen. Jeffrey Epstein, who's got a treasure trove of information that could possibly bring down some of the most powerful human beings on the planet. Re Donald Trump, re Prince Andrew, re Mr. Clinton, was placed on suicide watch, and then somehow, some way, circumstances conspired together such that he died in his cell. And do you remember the initial report, the autopsy by Dr. Sampson, in which she said that his autopsy results were consistent with a suicide, and that was the end of the case? But then Epstein's family hired an independent review of somebody else to do the autopsy by the name of Dr. Baden, and Mr. Baden came out with the exact opposite report, in which Mr. Baden said that he hadn't seen anything like this in 50 years be anything other than someone killing him, a homicide, not a suicide. And of course, after that came out, everybody came with the Facebook, stuff about how Epstein didn't kill himself, and we all kind of chuckled at it, and I said, this is kind of terrifying that all of us know that a state actor, Mrs. Sampson, who was the New York City medical examiner for the state, that she would participate in a disinformation campaign to cover up the fact that Mr. Epstein was killed. And so, because of how the horrific nature of Epstein's character and crimes, all of us were kind of like, we all kind of know he didn't kill himself, but there's going to be no tears shed on behalf of Mr. Epstein. And I was kind of saying, I get it, but that makes me very uncomfortable, because I think we're missing a bigger issue here. And the bigger issue was obviously that all these groups are conspiring together to conceal the truth from the public, even though we know, because we have eyes. Well, a couple days ago, the Washington Times published this gem. Asphyxiation, not the cause of George Floyd's death. Re-autopsy. And in that report, we read the following. George Floyd died Monday from a combination of pre-existing health conditions exacerbated by being held down by Minneapolis police officers, not from strangulation or asphyxiation, based on the medical examiner's initial report. Preliminary findings from a Tuesday autopsy conducted by the Hennepin County medical examiner found, and I'm quoting now, no physical findings that support a diagnosis of traumatic asphyxiation or strangulation, according to the criminal complaint filed Friday against former officer Derek Michael Chauvin. Mr. Floyd had underlying health conditions, including coronary artery disease and hypertensive heart disease, said the complaint from the Hennepin County attorney. The combined effects of Mr. Floyd being restrained by police, his underlying health conditions, and any potential intoxicants in his system likely contributed to his death. Did you see that nice setup? Did you catch it? Any potential intoxicants? How much you want to bet? It comes back that he had some weed in his system. And for a lot of, a big swath of white America, that will be enough to convict the man to be executed on the side of the street. Don't you remember? We were talking about Trayvon and how he got suspended. How many news stories did we hear about Mr. Martin, Trayvon Martin? How he got suspended because they caught weed in his backpack? We heard that story about 1 million times. Where you see the setup already? So, I didn't say anything. Whatever. I didn't need to show you what I'm about to show you to know that was BS. This, to me, was more obvious in the Epstein situation because I I didn't watch the video because I refused to watch the video, but I have seen the pictures. And I did hear people say that this man's knee was on this man's neck for about 8 minutes. So I didn't need to look at this nonsense to know that it wasn't true. Now, I've got a friend in this forum. The guy's a Nazi. The guy's literally a Nazi. Terrible human being. He's about to get chrismated, I think, in the Eastern Orthodox Church. So inshallah, Jesus can change his heart. But when this brother says something about this particular situation, I expect him to jump on a report like this and crow and, hey, he had drugs in his system, blah, blah, you Negroes, you're always on crack. I get it. With that fella. But then, unfortunately, this happened. So here we are today, about a couple hours ago. And remember now, according to them, he had pre-existing conditions. He was unhealthy, had pre-existing conditions, may have some intoxicants in him. All right, well, let's see. Here is Dr. Baden. Now, you know what's funny? This is the same doctor that did the independent examination of Epstein. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the same doctor who told us that the initial report from the New York City Medical Examiner was BS and told us what we all knew anyway, that Epstein was killed, is the same doctor that was marshaled in this particular situation. Now, I wonder what the good doctor is going to say. Maybe he's going to tell us that Brother Floyd's pre-existing condition is what caused his death upon his expert analysis. Let's see. Let's watch together.
The autopsy shows that Mr. Floyd had no underlying medical problem that caused or contributed to his death.
Huh. So the expert medical examiner that's known as one of the best in the business is saying that Mr. Floyd did not have a pre-existing medical condition. Watch this now, very important, that contributed to his death. He did not say that this brother had no pre-existing medical conditions, because I have one right now. I've got a hairline fracture in my right foot that, quite frankly, I injured it about a year, 2.5 years ago, and I still haven't gotten it done. So I have a pre-existing medical condition. I also have a heart murmur. I set records, though, for my qual times, but I also have a heart murmur. See, those are pre-existing conditions, but if I got shot, I got shot in the neck and I bled out in the street, which I almost happened to me one time, those two issues would have nothing to do with the direct cause of my death, right? So the doctor is not telling us that this brother had no pre-existing medical conditions. What he's saying is there are no pre-existing medical conditions that contributed to his death. That's what Baden is saying. Well, why, oh why, Dr. Baden, did he end up dying then? Because we don't know.
The cause of death, in my opinion, is asphyxia due to compression of the neck, which, as Mr. Crump indicated, can interfere with blood flow and oxygen going to the brain, and compression of the back, which interferes with breathing. When he said, "I can't breathe," unfortunately, many police are under the impression if you can talk, that means you're breathing. That is not true. I am talking and talking and talking and not breathing in front of you. So the concept that a person says, "I can't breathe," like Mr. Garner, like in this instance, means you should take it seriously.
Huh. I remember at a fireside I was having a discussion with an officer who obviously didn't care about Eric Garner and about the fact that he died on the side of the street. And this officer said, I said he was telling those folks that he couldn't breathe and they didn't let up. And the officer very wryly said, I mean, if you can say it, then obviously you can breathe. Ha 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 ha. So maybe somebody needs to send a memo to law enforcement that when you have, I don't know, guy looks to be about 185 to 200 pounds. When you've got that amount of pressure on the neck of a human being and then his back, that it might cut off blood flow to the brain and might make it so the person has a hard time breathing, you know, releasing and exercising that diaphragm, might have a problem. So, look, here's the point. All of us knew this already. We knew that Officer Chauvin, or whatever his name is directly responsible for the death of this brother. We didn't need an autopsy to see that. See, this is the problem now that folks with certain mindsets have to graduate to. You know, if this was 10 years ago, before the ubiquity of iPhones, where everybody now has a camera, this would be an open and shut case, right? We'd hear about how Mr. Floyd was about, 6'4", 250. We'd hear how he was resisting, this big, strong black man. We'd have heard how he was resisting and all this, and maybe the cop would have had an eye jammy somewhere, you know, and that was the end of it, right? It wouldn't even be a thing. We know that. You and I both know that. Now we have iPhones, so everybody's recording this stuff happening. And the young lady who recorded this brother dying is obviously, she used the word traumatized, and she obviously is. Look, now we've got iPhones, so now the unfortunate thing for these police officers is now we've got video. But even with video, as Eric Garner and Philando Castile and Tamir Rice showed us, even getting killed on video is not necessarily enough to get an indictment, much less an actual charge. So, this is what we have, folks. This dude killed this guy on the side of the street, and we needed to, now think about this, we needed to get a top-level medical examiner to tell us all what we already knew. And that is that this brother was killed by this officer. We know that. We didn't need Dr. Baden, but you need Dr. Baden because this tells us that the powers that be, look, the same corruption that was animating the New York City medical examiner to tell us all that this was consistent with a self-inflicted suicide, and she ruled out homicide. The same corruption that participated in that type of cover-up is the same corrupt group of people who were trying to participate in this cover-up. Don't you see? And this is why I was uncomfortable with the way that the Epstein situation was handled, because I knew if they could do that to one of the richest white people on the planet, what the hell were they going to do with us? And here we go. Now, it just so happens that the family could afford Mr. Baden because this is such a high-profile situation. And I'm sure there's a lot of black athletes behind the scene. Cap is talking about it, LeBron, et cetera, that are willing to fund this stuff. But come on, ladies and gentlemen, we all know what this is. If this does not indicate that there is a concerted, systemic now, what we're talking about is the system. We are not talking about people's personal feelings toward black and brown people. We're talking about a system. It's the same system that happened with Epstein. I don't believe that medical examiner had any affection for Epstein whatsoever. However, this woman is an agent of a system, and she did what she was supposed to do as a representative of the state. And it is the same system that the same system that protects pedophilic politicians in New York, and that will kill someone in order to protect pedophilic politicians in New York, is the same system that is arrayed against black and brown people that we've been telling y'all over and over again is an actual reality. And unfortunately, the only people that I saw countenancing this silly initial report was my right-leaning friends. I'm sorry, but it's true. I saw for a couple days people messaging me, hey, what do you think about the situation? Hey, it came out that asphyxiation had nothing to do with it, blah, 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 blah. And the reason I ignored you and didn't answer you was because, quite frankly, I'm trying to keep some of you as actual friends. None of you who are messaging me, and you know who you are, and I'm not talking about my buddy Bricktown Media. By the way, he's got a channel. You should really check it out. He was talking about how the EMTs did not administer CPR and the rest of it. You know, he's talking to me last night, and he was like, "I can't believe this." That was a very, very important and salient point that was missed in all this hullabaloo, which. Later on, Dr. Baden went and talked about that, how CPR was not administered on the scene. They administered it after he was in the ambulance, which, his attorney essentially said the ambulance was a hearse. And it's true, in that situation, the ambulance was a hearse. The bigger issue for me in this whole situation is, why was the initial medical examiner complicit in this cover-up? Why were they complicit, and who were they covering up for, and who is writing that check? Now, there is also another examination that came out, and now Izzy from the channel has reported that this is going to get escalated now to murder one, right? So now it's going to be murder one. And I'm not very thrilled about that, because look, we saw this in the Trayvon Martin case with Zimmerman. They went for murder one, and Zimmerman got off because it's actually pretty difficult to prove murder one. Murder one is premeditated murder. It is obvious homicide. I mean, it's literally on the death certificate now is a homicide. But, guys, this is where we are now. This is where we are. And we got to ask ourselves, who was behind this apparatus to falsify this information? And do you believe? I'll be in the comment section. And look, if you're going to be upset or triggered by a racist bastard posting talking about how George Floyd deserved it and all the rest of it, ignore the comment section this time, because you're gonna get that from this particular individual. And no, I'm not gonna ban him from the channel, because I believe that God can change everybody, and I think it'll be a great story when he repents of his racism and all the rest of it. I'm just warning you, if something like that triggers you, don't go in the comment section. But I want to know from you guys in the comment section whether or not you believe that we're going to get an actual conviction here. Murder one is extremely difficult to prove, and maybe there's some backstory here. I don't know, because these two worked at the same nightclub together. Some of the elements of the story are very strange, I have to tell you, especially in the I'm not one of these conspiracy people, but some of the elements of the story are strange. These two people knew each other. Apparently they worked together. But I think getting a murder one conviction on an officer, especially considering that these people use this maneuver all the time, even though apparently it's an illegal maneuver, I think that's going to be extremely difficult to get this man charged for. Now, I had a friend that said he had seen a meme. He actually called me. He said, "Look, if we would have if we would have got caught on camera yoking somebody up like that and having the neck on there for 2 minutes, and the guy expired, we'd be in the brig. That's a complete violation of ROE. That's rules of engagement in a war zone with people trying to kill you. Even if it was a combatant. I don't know if you guys have ever been in this situation, but the situation changes. You get the guy down and he's wounded or whatever, or he's displaying the outward acts of surrender or whatever. You got to treat the guy in a certain way so as to, when you start transporting him, now his life literally is in your hands. So, in a war zone, you have stricter ROE for civilians than you do in the streets of the United States of America, where the police are militarized, and they're apparently not under the same ROE as actual soldiers in an actual war zone for people who are trying to murder them, kill them. This is where we are in America, ladies and gentlemen. All you could do is laugh about it and say, look, if it's my time to die, it's my time to die, but you gotta die as a man. And so, you know, somebody was upset at me for saying I would never die the way that Mr. Floyd died. There's no respect to that, brother. It's just me personally, I'm not gonna leave the world that way. Now, I don't have any control as to the day that I'm going to leave the world. That's up to Allah. But trust and believe, I'm not leaving the world like that. Or as Mr. Cat Williams says, we can end music for the both of us. Love your neighbor. Take care of each other. Middle America, we are the media. Till next time, guys.